My name is Christy Goldsmith. I'm the Assistant Director of the Campus Writing Program, and I'm excited today to talk about two of my favorite things, and that is simple rubrics and media comments. I think that they are time-saving and they're also really good pedagogy. With me today are my other colleagues, Dr. Julie Burt. You see her in the chat, thank you, or in the video. She is the postdoctoral fellow here at the Campus Writing Program and a master of both online teaching and science ed stuff. So let her know if you have questions about that. And then of course, our great coordinator, Jackie, is here. She's keeping notes and taking attendance. So she is behind the scenes right now. Thank you everyone for joining me. I'm gonna one more time put the interactive handout link here because I know that that chat moves kind of quickly. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which means that it makes it a little bit more challenging for me to see your faces. So feel free to interrupt me with voice, or Julie can help me know that someone has a need. All right, can you see my screen? Julie says yes, thank you. This is the second iteration of this workshop, where we wanted to think about ways to provide really good feedback on writing while also saving time at the end of the semester when we've all had quite the long semester. So this handout is going to be available to you after this workshop. But before I show you how to save it and access it later, I did want to say that this workshop will be recorded. Just know that if you speak and show your camera, your face will be on the recording. But the chat will not be saved. So if you feel uncomfortable with that, please let either Julie or Jackie know. Otherwise, we'll begin the recording here shortly. While I'm waiting for you to provide that feedback, a little quick tutorial of Google Docs might be useful. So the good thing about Google Docs is that you can save this within your own Google Docs and it will be accessible to you forever. You can also see things that I add and change. So to do that, you should have right here where I have a star and a move, you should have a little triangle with a plus. If you click that and you're logged into your Google account, it will save it to your Google Docs. It'll be there as long as you want it. If you are not a Google user, you can also save this with the links by going to File, Download, and then choosing your version. So you can choose Microsoft Word or PDF, and all of the links I've embedded within will stay if you download in that way. So make sure that you save this afterwards. We can also send you the link too if something happens to it. Again, I'm Christy Goldsmith. I'm the Assistant Director of the Campus Writing Program and a huge fan of rubrics, but maybe not the typical rubrics, as we'll discuss here shortly. So if you have been to any Campus Writing Program workshop in person or online, you know that we love this guy, old John Bean, and this Engaging Ideas book. And I was reading this book preparing long ago for a different workshop, and this quote struck me. So I'm just going to read this to you and think about it for a moment. Because I want to avoid the impression that rubrics imply precision, I make sure that the numbers on my rubric grids do not represent either course points or percentage points. Moreover, when I return graded papers to students, I always present the grade as a letter, a B or C minus, for example, not as a rubric score. I explained to students that the circled numbers on the rubric represent a kind of for official use only space, often seen on bureaucratic forms. So feel free to throw in the chat what you think about that. That's a little bit of a different conception of rubrics than what we're used to, right? We often think of rubrics as a way to make writing objective, but here John Bean is saying, you know, rubrics are more of a communication tool to the student than like a way for me to figure out exactly what points to give the students. So I'll give you a second. Anyone have thoughts about that? Is this a different conception about rubrics than you're used to? Do you agree, disagree? Need to think more about it? Laura says, I like the idea of disengaging the grade from rubric values. I do too, Laura, and the reason I like that is because it helps students understand that writing can never be objective as much as we want to make it such, right? That it's always subjective, and that's kind of the neat part about writing, right? Is that there's this gray area between the black and white. We know that the way to improve writing is also to provide really good feedback, and so the rubrics can do that without us being forced to pick a 3 or a 4, right? Which I'm always like 3.5. That's sort of what I am challenged with the rubric categories. So the goal of a rubric and of our session today is twofold. We want to give better feedback, and we also want to invest less time. Thanks, Caroline. I think students would think, this is different. So what I'll talk about as we go throughout today is that a key part of both of these elements, both the media comments and the single point rubrics, is really to communicate with your students both the intent and also how they find these elements. So lots of student communication is necessary in this new way of thinking about teaching writing. Okay. So if we are sort of thinking about, maybe we're not agreeing with, but we're thinking about John Bean's conception of rubrics as a way to interact with students, then I suggest that single point rubrics are a really good way to do this. All right, so here's where Flukiger, I suppose is how I pronounce her last name, which is this article, by the way. She's one of our colleagues at Nebraska, just down the road. And she wrote this really great argument about how single point rubrics are a tool for responsible self-assessment. And then she extrapolates it also to classroom assessment. So if you want to read more, there it is. But here's what she said. She says the difference between a single and a multi-point rubric is in the number of levels of performance described. So normally when we think of rubrics, we think of categories, right? We have the 4 category and the 3 and the 2 and the 1. In a single point rubric, we have only one level of performance, and that is the proficient level. So we're not thinking about levels of proficiency. We're saying these are the markers for proficiency, and therefore we're creating one set of criteria for those markers. She talks about a lot of reasons why single point rubrics are better for both students and teachers, but the one she forefronts is that you don't have to figure out how to describe all the ways students do poorly, right? We were in a meeting at the law school before campus was shut down, and one of the law professors said that it always is remarkable to her how many ways there are for her students to do poorly on something, right? She can never like anticipate all the ways to do poorly. And so a single point rubric asks us to not do that. We instead just say, this is what I expect as proficiency, and then we give students feedback around those proficiency markers. So this might be difficult to think about in the abstract, so let's look at a sample. Hopefully you're seeing this as well. Did I share the right thing? Thank you, Julie. It's always a challenge. I feel like we'll be really good at Zoom by the time we get back full swing on campus, right? So this is a single point rubric that I read that quote and I started reading and thinking about single point rubrics, and I wanted to try it out. So I used this in a 4,000 level class in the Department of Learning, Teaching, and Curriculum. And all of my assignments are structured this way. I actually link the assignment sheet here, so everything is sort of linked within one document, so students have everything they need there. It also makes it easy to go from Canvas to Blackboard to wherever else you may need to go. But this rubric, as you can see, has just 3 criteria. It has theoretical content. These are students learning to be teachers, by the way. It has practical examples, 2 things we would hope teachers would think about, right? The theory and the practice. And then it has language use. So I'm an old English teacher and I can't get away from effective language use. So that's my 3rd category there. So what I've done here is really just described what I expected in each of these categories. And then I've thought about like, how can I provide really good feedback to students? They might want to know areas of concern, so areas that they need work on. And then it's always important, because writing is hard and sometimes can be frustrating and demoralizing, to provide ways that they've really exceeded those standards. So rather than just saying proficient as good as you can get here, I've said, this is what I expect from proficiency. Here's where you hit the mark, here's where you exceeded the mark, and here's where maybe you have a little bit of work to do. So I've used this twice, and I tweaked it before I used it the 2nd time, and students actually really loved it. So Caroline, I did do the early work of saying, this is a new way of looking at rubrics. I'm going to give you points based on sort of more abstract markers. I'm not going to give you points based on every single tiny criteria, but this is what I expect you to do. And I'm just going to provide feedback. And they really, really enjoyed it. So I think it took me less time because I wasn't trying to decide between a 4 and a 3. We also know that we've many times graded with a typical rubric. And then at the end, we're like, ooh, that grade is not what I wanted. So we go back and we fudge the numbers, right? So this doesn't make us do that. It makes us be honest, and then we can really give good feedback to our students. So it did take some communication, and if I were to do it again, I think I would break it into maybe 4 categories or some areas that I wanted to provide more feedback on that weren't there. So at this time, I would like to stop and ask what questions you have sort of abstractly or theoretically about single point rubrics before I go on and talk about the process of creating one, or one process. Doesn't sound like we have any questions. Laura asked a great questions, but I wanted to give her feedback later because it's about content, not necessarily about grammar rubric construction. Caroline, here we go. You still have to put numbers for each of the 3 categories, right? Well, you could or you couldn't. And in fact, what I'm going to show you here are 2 different ways of using a single point rubric specifically in Canvas. One for those of us that still would like to hold on to those numbers, and one for those of us that are willing to sort of let go of some of that. Now, I will say in the bean construction, he would say no numbers are necessary at all. So if you notice in my rubric, if I can click on it again here, here's where I put my points. So 20 points, and 10. So I thought that was important so students can kind of see what's most important and where the weight of the rubric sort of falls. But Bean would say we don't need to put that at all. We literally just put the criteria, and then at the end we give them a grade out of points. Again, that takes some communication because students are not used to this, and it would be a challenge, I recognize. So I'll state my limitations of my research here. It is a challenge if you have multiple TAs or multiple graders. So we can talk about how to maybe deal with that here in a few minutes. All right, thanks, Phil. So let's move on to how to create a single point rubric. I started this new single point rubric. So this semester I'm teaching a graduate course called Academic and Professional Writing for Graduate Students. And it's this really neat course of 25 master's and doctoral students across probably 10 departments of campus. By the way, self-serving announcement, I'm teaching it in the fall as well. And I have a flyer if you would like me to send it your way. But one of the big assignments there was a literature review. And so I created this checklist when I was thinking about like, what are the elements of a literature review that would be really useful across disciplines? So I created this checklist, and then I tried to grade them with this checklist, and I thought, this is a challenge because some of these are truly checklist items. So for example, 4 pages, double spaced, you know, all that stuff. That's a check. They got it or they don't. But this one displays a clear organizational strategy. There's a continuum of proficient on this, right? There are different ways that they could do well and different ways they could do poorly. So that didn't lend itself well to a checklist. So what I did was first thought about, here are all of my learning outcomes or my assignment objectives or whatever language you would like to use. And I divided them out. So I put in one document things that were truly checklist items, page count, including a certain element, these sort of things. And the other document, I put things that could have a continuum or that I wanted to give more detailed feedback on. And that's how I grouped my elements. Then I said, okay, I'm going to keep the checklist items as a checklist. I literally just gave that to them and I said, check all these off before you turn your paper in, and I'm going to check them off and give you points for them. That's easy. But the ones that needed some more feedback, I decided that I was going to make a single point rubric. And then the challenge came of deciding the structure. So there are 2 structures that work for a single point rubric within Canvas. I'm going to show this to you outside of Canvas now, and then I'll show you inside of Canvas. But Caroline asked about putting points on the categories. And so if you are, I know this is small, we'll see it better on Canvas, but if you are a person who still really likes being able to sort of norm grades or make it a little bit more objective, you can create your criteria. So here are the 4 criteria that I decided to use for my literature review assignment. And then you could still create ratings. So 4, 3, 2, 1 with the excellent, satisfactory, or proficient, developing those markers. And then you could put points here. So this assignment ends up to be 16 points in my class, for example. So that's one way to do it. The other way that is maybe a little closer to what Bean was thinking about, but definitely a divergence from what we're used to when we think about rubrics, is this more free-form style of rubric. So this is the way that Canvas allows us to think about use single point rubrics within the Canvas system. I like it better when it has the single point in the middle and the concerns and kudos, but that you cannot recreate in Canvas. So this is as close as I could get. This is how I was trying to sort of recreate that one I showed you in my Google Doc. So here are the criteria, the same criteria as I created in my 4321 rubric. And then here is the kudos and concerns. So this one, you can see, I've totally taken points off of. So the points will be totally removed from the rubric. It really just be like a grade in a rubric as doing two different things. Okay, so that's what I did. I had a checklist that was assignment outcomes and objectives. I divided them out by ones that were truly checklist items, ones that had elements I wanted to give more feedback on, and then I decided what my structure would look like. Then we can talk about pulling it into Canvas, which is fairly simple by using Canvas Commons, and then using media comments on that as well. So I'm going to pause for 1 second to see if there's any questions so far on those rubrics. Okay. So thanks, Caroline. So hold that idea in your head for a second, this idea of the single point rubric. Oh, I really like glow and grow, Laura. That's awesome. I think that's better than kudos and concerns. That would work really great for some disciplines too. It has flair. So hold that in your head for 1 second. And then let's think about media comments as paired with this. So a little bit of the theory surrounding media comments. When I say media comments, I mean video and audio comments rather than like traditional text. There's this great study by these scholars, Borup, West, Thomas, and Graham, and they found that for students, the instructor's emotional expressions in video had more authenticity than text. So they felt like when they were provided feedback in video, it was much more authentic. And it was also seen as more effective than text in establishing this social presence. There's a lot of other really interesting studies about audio feedback that does the same. But as we know, comments can be taken wrong when they don't have the tone and the inflection. And when we're talking about writing, which is something that's very closely tied to identity, whether it's academic writing or not, that tone and inflection is really key. The other positive part about media comments is that they're faster. Even if we type really fast, we still talk faster than we type. I talk faster than anyone types, I think. So it's helpful for me to be able to do some video comments and to point to specific elements using my voice, and it saves so much time. So good pedagogy saves time, and I think it pairs really nicely with the single point rubric because you can divide and conquer. So you're not doing the work twice. I don't know about you. I know Julie has weighed in and said that this is a struggle for her too, but I struggle with what I write in the text versus what I write in the comment box. And sometimes I repeat myself and then I'm like, I've done double the work and they aren't going to read it anyway, right? And it gets really frustrating. So what I think is really useful is that we can use the media comment, so the audio or video comment, to provide sort of like a holistic feedback piece to them. So we can read through the document, then we can click on the elements of the rubric to grade the document. So I can click kudos, I can click concerns, and then rather than typing in every box of the rubric, that can get very tedious, I can then just leave a voice comment and say, I noticed you did this really well. Here are some examples in your text. I thought you maybe struggled with this element. Here's an example of how you could improve that. So I think it's really useful to be able to go between the rubric where that shows the more objective clicking, like this is where you did well and this is where you struggled, and then the voice that helps provide that more robust support. Okay, so that is, I'm gonna get to that, Caroline, I promise, don't let me forget it. So that is why I think that these two pair really nicely together. So here's our point. We're gonna go to, in our remaining few minutes, we're gonna go to Canvas and we're gonna look and see physically how this works within Canvas. So I think single point rubrics are useful with media comments in two ways. One might get to Caroline's point here. I think it's really useful to use media comments and these more subjective rubrics for final copies of assignments where students have minimal revision opportunities. In other words, you're not going to correct every wrong usage of APA or every comma in their final copy because they can't revise that, right? It's the end. So instead, you could use a single point rubric to show them the categories where they need to improve next course or next semester, and then give them a media comment to give the more holistic reasoning for their grade, essentially. So I think that's the most useful thing for me, especially. You could also use this pair early in the writing process as a formative assessment strategy. So that's where you could really take the grading out of it. You could give them points for completing the document. And then instead of giving them a grade in each category, you could say, here's what you did well, here's what you should focus on for revision. And then they would have sort of like a revision plan in that way. Laura mentioned that she liked letting learners fill in the single point rubric themselves, and that's definitely supported in the literature as well. So if you don't have time to use this yourself, or if you feel hesitant using it with a bunch of TAs, this might be a great way for students to create their own revision plan and kind of see where they have some work to do. Also note that rubrics denote proficiency categories. So everything I put in the rubric is the categories of proficiency I want that assignment to reflect. The media comments give examples and extended explanations. So they're kind of doing two different things, so I'm not doubling up my work. Now I'll tell you a couple things about this. Audio comments do take a little bit longer to listen to sometimes. And I know when I'm ready to give an audio comment, I have to take a few notes first. So I tried doing audio comments when I was grading students' language use and something, and that didn't work. Like I might as well have just typed it out because I made so many notes that I didn't save myself any time. What it works best for is when I want to kind of have a conversation with students. So a more extended writing piece, or a more objective or persuasive writing piece. I think that I might have my TAs, if I were using this with TAs, I might have my TAs submit a few bullet points that they talked about in, say, 5 of the papers they graded, so you can kind of see what they're talking about and save yourself a little bit of time. Feel free to weigh in if you have more ideas for Caroline as well in the chat. All right, so let's look at how this plays out in an assignment. So a couple things. There are 2 ways to get to Canvas Speedgrader, and all of my demonstration is going to be in Canvas Speedgrader because I love it and I think it's super useful. One of the journalism professors told us all last week in a meeting that, like, if the university takes away Canvas, we're going to revolt because it is so user-friendly compared to Blackboard and otherwise. So this is within Canvas. I will talk about at the end the ways Turnitin can allow you to do this because it does have some functionality. It's just not as user-friendly. So when you go to your course, I go to assignments, and this is how I access my students' work. So I'm going to show you both of the types of rubrics that I've talked about today. Let's start with the more objective one that we're sort of used to. So I click on my assignment, and what you're going to see here is, here's my assignment. I didn't add any content, but I could add some explanation there. And here's the rubric. This rubric, by the way, has been pushed to the Canvas Commons. I'll show you how to find it. So at the end of this presentation, if you're excited about using these and you don't want to go through the futzing with Canvas, which can be super frustrating, you can take these rubrics, pull them into your course, and adjust whatever you want. So you can put your own content here, but leave the structure. So here's how I get to SpeedGrader. I go to the assignment, and then on the right-hand side, I click SpeedGrader. So it's important you click within SpeedGrader and not downloading the submissions, because that won't let you do what you want to do. So when you get to SpeedGrader, a few things here. The first thing that I would do is read through and make a few comments. So this is a good point to note that the comments that are done within the document, in my view, are what we would call localized comments, right? They ask students to pay attention to a specific local spot for a specific reason. That does something different than the voice comment that I make at the end, right? They work together, but they do something different. So I'll go through and I'll make comments right there. And then I get to the rubric. So here you see there's a place to put a grade because I apparently did not set this to have points, whoops. But there's a place to put a grade here, and then there's the rubric, and then you'll see my assignment comment here. So to grade this, you just click View Rubric. Now because this one has points attached, you can't have a 4, 3, 2, 1 category without having points attached to it in Canvas. It just won't let you. In the perfect world, it would. But I can click and I could say, oh, you were supposed to have a table. There's clearly not a table in this piece of writing. So nope, that's no good. This was excellent. This was satisfactory. This was excellent. And then I hit save. And notice that it doesn't directly pull it to here because I have not set the rubric to provide the assignment grade. That's like an extra step you have to go through, and we don't want to do that in a single point rubric because that's where we're going to have more conversation with our students, right? These points may not necessarily connect to the grade, or they might, and that's fine too. So I've made localized comments. I've clicked these boxes on a rubric to let students know where they're doing well and where they need to work. And then I could create a little comment. So here we'll watch my little comment.
This is an example of a video comment where I could give students holistic feedback on their writing, or maybe give them more information about why I gave them a certain score in one of the categories of the rubric. I could also ask them to make specific points for revision or follow up with me.
So that's how easy it is. I will tell you, at one point last week, I made 3 or 4 of these lovely little video comments to my students and found out that none of them had audio. Somehow something happened in Canvas and it didn't upload. So it is imperative that when you create that, you keep it on the page. I go do something else and make sure that it pulls that in. We haven't had that issue recently after last week's issue, but just know that that's something that may take a minute or two depending on your internet upload speed. The audio does not have that problem. Okay, so before I stop for questions, there is the 4-3-2-1 rubric. Let me show you another way to make it to SpeedGrader that is the way that the course design and technology folks tell you. So they like to go in from the grade book. So you see I'm in the grade book, and test student is who I'm being today, and we're going to look at this assignment. So if you click on that assignment, this little arrow to the right will pop up this window, and you can click on SpeedGrader. Here's a cool new thing. You can actually make students excused from an assignment that wasn't there before, and it will take it out of their grades, which has been useful for me as I've been trying to help students deal with what's going on in the world right now. So I click on SpeedGrader this way, and it brings me, there we go, speaking of internet speed, it brings me right back to SpeedGrader again. So again, I would read through the student's document, and then I would view rubric. So on this one, it just has kudos and concerns, and you'll notice that there's no points here. These little bubbles will allow you to type specific comments, but we don't want to do that because we're trying not to duplicate our work, right? So I click kudos. Oh no, I gotta click concern. There's no table. Maybe the rest of these are pretty good. And then I hit save. Now, if I want this to have a grade, I have to physically go up here and type the grade in. So just know that if you could go through lots of these, grade them all up, and not actually look like you're getting anywhere unless you physically type the grade in there. That took me a long time to figure out. And then here's an audio comment. So you can see there's no face, but
this is an example of an audio comment.
Sounds just the same. That's what we do if we haven't fixed our hair that day, right? So I like this one because I think this one provides more formative feedback perhaps than the other one, but I recognize that I teach a class as the sole instructor. I have 25 students, so it's a little bit different than if I were in a large enrollment class with multiple instructors or TAs. All right. What questions do you have before I show you about Canvas Commons? That's right, Beth. Thank you. You don't have to type in the grade if you check the box on your rubric that says to use for assignment grading. That's absolutely true. I would probably not check that box if I were using the kudos and concerns style of rubric because that leaves like too many points. It'd either be like 0 points or 10 points, right? But if I were using this 4-3-2-1 and I wanted to translate directly to a grade, I could definitely do that. Well, please keep the questions coming in, but while you're doing that, let me go to the Canvas Commons and show you this wonderful world if you've not yet seen it. So Commons are on this left bar. So you see I've clicked on courses now. If I go down a little bit, I click on Commons. And the cool thing about Canvas Commons is you can literally find a rubric for everything and not have to reinvent the wheel. This allows you to look across the entire world, secondary schools, postgraduate schools, etc. But you're going to want to look for our rubrics because, of course, CWP's rubrics are the best, right? So we're going to type in this box Mizzou, and we're going to type CWP. And when we do so, you see that we have some rubrics uploaded. Here's something else that might be useful, by the way. We did some work with the engineering department and created some rubrics that I think are wonderful for writing the abstract. So if your students write an abstract, you can use this rubric. Here's a rubric for the claim evidence reasoning structure. I know some of us in the workshop today are teaching students how to use this structure, so that might be useful. Here's one for an oral presentation, and then here's one for a full research paper. So you can use any of these. They were all created by the Campus Writing Program staff for your use. But the two from today are the single point rubric 4-to-1 scale and the single point rubric with the Kudos Concerns. So I'll tell you, the Kudos Concerns took a long time to figure out how to get that into Canvas. So if you're going to use that one, I would definitely import it to my course and not try to reinvent the wheel. So I click on the assignment, and then I click on import download, and look, it lets me pull it into whatever course I want. So I might pull it into my grad course, and there it is. It takes like 5 minutes to appear there, but then I can easily attach it to any assignment that I've made that I want to attach it to. And I can also edit it. So let me show you that. Go back to my courses here. So say that I wanted to pull up an assignment design paper. I'm going to attach this, and then Julie's going to have to, oh no, I'm not going to attach it to that one. Sorry, Julie, we won't mess that one up. Let me attach it to something else. Well, we'll just attach it here and I can fix it. So what you have to do is when you edit your assignment, oh, I lied, sorry. So I'm going to delete it from here. So all you have to do is click the plus rubric button, and it's going to pull up immediately for you to create a rubric, but you can find the rubric you've pulled into your course. And so I can go down to my course and say, oh, I have some in Campus Writing Program. Oh, I want the Freeform rubric. And then you just have to hit use this rubric, and it'll pull it in. And then what you can do to make it your own course's rubric is hit that little pencil and edit anything that you want. I wouldn't edit the 4 and the 1, the Kudos and Concerns, because that's what took a while to sort of figure out how to do. But you can actually edit each of these and say, I don't need a table, but instead I want them to have citations, whatever. You can have that there. Something I will show you that I've noticed, if you pull it in from the Canvas Commons, you have to go in and write remove points from rubric if you want it to look like the way that my rubrics look. So then I hit update, and there it is. You don't have to reinvent the wheel there. All right, a couple quick things from the chat, and then I'll take questions and we'll be good to go. Laura tells us that the students appreciate a more streamlined feedback process. I think a single point definitely makes it less anxiety producing, because they're all trying to figure out which point to look at, right? Do they want to try to get a 4 because they're the overachievers, or do they need to get a 2.5 because they're trying to pass the class? And there's all this math that is involved, and this sort of gets rid of that and just says, here's the proficiency marker. Julie told us that she uses the video commenting a lot for the larger papers her students are revising, and they appreciate the direct connection. Yeah, I think it's useful in this time especially, but even if we're thinking about quality online pedagogy in the future, having that connection is a great thing, and it doesn't have to be as stressful as in like an asynchronous Zoom environment, right? That's what I like about it. I can do it when I'm feeling like I want to be in front of a camera, and when I feel like I want to have some conversation with my students. The last time I did this workshop, someone asked me, but how do you know if they're reading it? And I tell you, or if they're watching the video comment, I get more direct feedback from all of the video comments I've done than anything that I've typed, and I type a lot. So just this morning, I had a student email me a question I'd asked her in a video comment. It was like a silly question, not even connected to our course. And she's like, oh, I heard your thing, and here's what I have to say. So I think that students are watching this, even though to us, it seems like it takes more time to watch a video comment. I also know if I have students produce video pieces for me, I actually just drag my computer around my kitchen, and I'll be making bread, as we're all doing, right? Or making dinner. And I'll listen to the comment, and I'll go and type a little note to the student, and I'll keep listening, and I'll type a little note. So it's makes it easier for me to grade and less like stuck in front of a computer as well. So I think that video commenting feature goes both ways. All right, let's go back to my handout here. So all of these blue words are links, and here's a link to the Canvas Commons. And I also made a little guide to show you how to pull in a rubric from the Canvas Commons with some screenshots. Someone asked for that last week, so feel free to use that. Now I will tell you, Turnitin. I do not use Turnitin. I don't do many assignments that students can really plagiarize, lots of reflection and application, and so I don't often use it. And I also can't use it in our demo course because you have to be an instructor. So that's something interesting I learned today. But what I did find out was you can, in fact, attach a rubric to an assignment, and here's a guide for that. Looks pretty user-friendly. And you can use only voice comments. So no video, just voice comments if you want to grade through Turnitin. But both of these options are available there. And I wish I could provide more information on that, but that's kind of all that I know for now. But I know some wonderful people in course design and technology that can help us out if we need it. All right, finally, here are our contact links. So contact us anytime if you have questions. If you try to do this tomorrow morning and you get stuck, please send me an email and I'll be happy to walk you through it. Or you can visit our website for more events as well. I'm happy to stick around for a while. I got done faster than last time. Success. I'm happy to stick around for a while and answer individual questions, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate the work you're doing in teaching with writing. Have a great day.